Any good push and pull exercises, or I'm gonna rephrase his question for him. When you're having pain in your lat, have you found exercise that have helped with that, or working around lat pain, or in general?
Where in the lat would be the first question.
Yep.
Because that's a yes and no answer. They're always, it depends, you know. We should make a shirt that says, it depends, with quotation marks, exclamation point, question mark. You know, because it's like,
Jacob, you heard the man.
it's like, come on, man. It's like, oh. But there's different areas that are different to work around. It's easier to work around, you know, and sometimes it becomes questionable what's really hurt. Because if you start looking at the scap area, there's a lot going on there. It's like looking at the shoulder. I mean, if you look at everything that's connecting up into the shoulder region, packed. I mean, it's like throwing darts against a dartboard. Like, what's wrong? And that the scap is kind of the same, because is it erectors? Is it traps? Is it lats? What's tight? What's not tight? What's the root cause of the problem? Where's it coming from? There's a lot of things that play into that. But the closer it is to the spine, so around the scap type area, the easier it is to work around. It hurts, but the easier it is to work around, as long as you keep the range of motion of the movements that you're doing. Again, I'm not a doctor or physical therapist. You keep the range of motion of what you're doing within your tolerance zone.
That pain-free range.
The pain-free range. I'm not telling you to go balls out and as heavy as you can. We need to get blood in there to be able to help it heal. So you don't want to go into pain on many of the movements, but you have more to play around. Now, if it's actually up high in your lat, you're really restricted. And a lot of that restriction is just coming because of the pain, because that's a different pain than the pain that you're dealing with when it's more in that shoulder blade area. So that part, and the other part with that is the start position, if you're to do a reduced range of motion, requires you going through pain to get to the position you can do.
Right.
Because you're going to start here, that's where it's going to hurt the most. Once you get it here, it's not bad. So you have to be really careful with that type of stuff. Standing cable work, standing away from a cable machine, and like standing rows, that reduces the weight. It makes it easier for you to be able to help. Yep. I'm answering the question directly. How do you train around? Right. I'm not saying this is right. This is assuming you're doing the things to address the issue. Right. Which learning how to actually use your lats is probably going to be the longer term answer. Everybody thinks that they're actually using their lats,
right,
but they're not. They're making a lot of their lat exercises like a barbell row. So they're making like an isolated lat exercise a compound movement without even knowing they're making it a compound movement.
Right.
Where a barbell row, yes, that's a compound movement, right? It's supposed to be that way. I don't necessarily know a low row should be a compound movement. A pull down shouldn't be a compound movement. Obviously, a single arm cable row should not be a compound movement.
Right.
That's not intended to work your obliques, you know, or your erectors or your traps and all those other things. So that would be the answer there.
In really finding out why does it hurt in the first place.
I'm assuming that's being
like,
done, but that's probably a
Yeah.
false assumption, because we see it all the time.
And then his second part of his question, will there be any Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu programming coming from Elite FTS?
I don't know. We may have some programs on the site now. I should know this, but I don't. I mean, you got thousands of articles.
I'm fairly certain we do. We were chatting with Phil DeRue a little bit, who's big in BJJ, so that could potentially be good as well.
Okay.
So, next question, super chat from Matt Corey. In 2019, I completely ruptured my pec tendon trying to bench 300 pounds. Is it realistic for me to get to this level again and potentially go past it?
100%. 100%. I mean, I forget who we had just recently. I had this conversation with somebody, and it was about, who was that? It was, we've been doing so many things since I got back. But it was about some doctors and the things that they say that they shouldn't say. You know, so I've had that same injury. I know exactly what he's talking about. And they have to, screw it back into the, anyhow, it doesn't matter. So I was told you would never bench 400 again. And this was, shortly after coming to Columbus. And the immediate thing that went through my mind was, okay, I had a 520 at the time, but that wasn't really my best. It was my best competitive, but it wasn't my best in the gym. So I'm like, okay, so if my 520 really wasn't 520 and it was 545, 550, somewhere at 560. But if I peaked it better, it might have been like 580. Not 600, but realistically 575, 580, if I peaked it right. So if he's saying 400 and that's based off 520, so I'm doing this fucked up math, right? I'm like, so I'm really at 500 using his logic.
Right.
So I'm at the 500, then if I had 500 and I could do 500, could I put 5 more pounds on that? I'm like, yeah, I probably could. Well, then could you put 5 more pounds on that? And this doesn't make sense, right? So they fuck with your head. Is where I'm going with this, because what happened was when I started to get close to 400 again, I became gun shy. So it wasn't that I was scared it was going to tear. It was I wasn't pushing with the force I needed to push with when that came up. So I changed the way I rehabbed everything from that point forward. I completely changed it. I went from what most people recommend to what I did, which we'll just leave it at that, where I was going to address that bullshit immediately, right? And just because I never wanted to go through that again. Now, I got through it and ended up benching, to answer his question, I ended up benching way over what I did beforehand, and this raw to raw. So in shirt to shirt, raw to raw, both, over what it was. It's a shitty injury though, because what I've seen with that one is, and I don't know how many years he's been past it, the first couple of years, the scar tissue is a bitch, especially if you're, it will pop and you're like, fuck, I tore it again. And it was just scar tissue kind of letting loose. I can't remember the amount of time, well over 10 times, going into the doctor, the orthopedic, and saying, I tore it again. I'm like, no, it's not torn. I'm like, okay, fine, cool, let's go. What the hell is it? Why does this keep happening? And then how do I get around doing that? The way I got around that, if that's the issue that he's dealing with, is I quit doing all isolation pec exercises. So everything I thought was helping, flies, band, all that crap, I'm like, fucking not doing any of it anymore. Not doing any of it. Just I'm going straight all 100% benching, keeping the specificity as tight as I possibly can, and keeping that scope very, very limited. Anything that I get hurt on, I'm staying away from for 4 to 6 weeks, and then going, and then it started to smooth out and quit happening. And then I was able to start to put some of those things back in again. I think what was happening is it was just rushing things a little bit too fast from there. So to answer the question, most definitely, if that's what you want to do, that's what you're able to do, 100%, 100 fucking %, way over that too.